All right, welcome to the Ultimate Hockey Show. A little bit later than normal. Today I had a meeting that I had to attend. So thank you for bearing with us. We're with you till 6:30. Then the NFL game takes over, at least in my house tonight. Uh, Cheering for the purple over the blue and white that might be the Rams. But anyway, that's besides the point. Speaking about blue, all things showing up blue for the Jets this week. My name is Michael Gill. I'm joined by, as always, Petty. Good evening, Rich. How are you?
Very good, Michael. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's just been a quiet week. Busy weekend. Monday is sort of my um recalibration day, if you will, and talking hockey with you helps and getting things ready for the next week for me.
Yeah.
Speaking of it, though, Rich, the Jets had a very good week. They went by my mathematics 2-0-1. A victory in their early week game. They were picking up a point in the LA game, and they picked up a full 2 points against the Colorado Avalanche. And Rich, I'm just going to cut right to the chase. I think, regardless of picking up 2 out of 3 points, I think these were two of the best games that the Jets have played this year. From a defensive standpoint, um, to be honest, I know there were a lot of people who had, to be honest, their shorts in a knot over that LA game and, not winning that game. But, when I look at it, I think LA is one of the top teams in the league when it comes to shot suppression, keeping opponents to the outside, not giving their opponents much, and but just were able to weather that storm, score on a power play.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had a scoring chance on one end, and then LA turns it back the other way and wins the game. To me, I saw a lot of that carbon copy, and I had to privilege of watching back the Colorado game on my phone after I got home from work on Saturday night, and I was just very, very impressed under the circumstances. Yes, I know it's back-to-back nights, but to me, that was just a continuation of what we saw on Friday, on Saturday. So,
Yep.
yeah, to me, and listen, I had to throw it to you this way before I sort of move out of the way and you can have uh, your say. Is it any accident that since Dylan Sambert has joined this lineup back into the top four, they've gotten back to that defensive style that made them so formidable in October, early November, and
Yeah.
maybe to a certain extent early December?
Oh, I would agree. I would say he's a huge part. Sorry, I just eating something well so that won't get cold. But
Yeah, yeah,
I
that's
think
okay.
he is a huge part of the team. Listen, there was all this talk when they lost in the offseason, Brendan Dillon,
Yep,
and who was going to play in the four hole, right, with Pionk, and never
right.
mind who's going to play with Morrissey, and are the Jets going to get a right-handed defenseman or something's going to happen? Like, how are they going to do this? And I just thought, that Sandberg kid, he is coming along. He is a huge part of this team, and he is going to develop into that spot. And he's done exactly that. He's done exactly that. And I think you could argue he might be one of the most important parts of the team from a defensive standpoint. He's not going to get you all these points, but he makes smart plays with the puck. He kills penalties. He's one of the top four defensemen on penalty kill. He plays against the other team's top lines with Pionk. They're not afraid to put him out at the end of the game. He blocks shots. He makes great that pass that he made to Ehlers on Saturday night. I was
Yep.
there. great read, like the sacrifice. He knocked down a puck, got pinched along the boards, and saw Ehlers and fired it through the middle to give him something to go by and to skate right into it. So with all his momentum, then Ehlers could split the D and have a chance at a shot on net. I mean, he's just, yeah, he's a huge part of the team. And I mean, not that he isn't over, not that they couldn't overcome without having him in the lineup, but he just makes the team so much better, in my opinion. And you couldn't have said that 3 years ago for him, but he's really developed into a great player for the Jets, one of the unsung heroes, if you will.
It's interesting, right? Because you don't really realize what you have until it's gone.
Yeah.
And I think we saw Sambert in the lineup, Sambert gone, and Sambert back in the lineup. Just what that's done for a stability standpoint. And listen, I think Neil Pionk is back to having a career year by Neil Pionk standards. He had a down year last year. Now that could be attributed to losing his best friend in a hockey accident in Europe. But like, to me, he just makes Neil Pionk's game that much better, along with his own game. And
Yeah.
I think that's a mark of a really good hockey player, is when you can make those around you and those you play with very good.
I agree.
Now, just a thought, Rhett. I mean, like, we talked about how Eric Comrie is 0-6-1 in his last 7 since starting 3-0. Um, to me, that's a very misleading stat. This 3-6-1, but Eric Comrie is as a backup. Because he plays a lot of those quote unquote ugly games, back end of a back to back. The team's tired. Team gets to the hotel at you know, unplanned and unpleasant hours. Is it your estimation too that Eric Comrie has just been Eric Comrie and certainly hasn't been the source of problems that some people might be making them out to be?
Yeah, I agree with you. Listen, he's going to get stuck into games more often than not
Right?
on the second half of a back to back, right? He's done a lot of things. I think a lot of the games he's the second night. So he's always playing behind a team that's a little bit more tired and has got some travel, the tiredness and bugs, or going to another time zone or traveling to a higher altitude or whatever it is. And I just think, yeah, listen, in those games that he lost, if you think back to those games, I'm just thinking about even the one that he lost when he played against, I don't think it was Detroit, but was it? Oh, yeah, when he lost against LA
Yep.
in overtime. Even this game, just, like a few nights ago on Friday night, he
Yep.
was really good in that game. Really good. I mean, it's just unfortunate the Jets got caught in a bad change in overtime, and Pionk got kind of hung out to dry all by himself there on the ice. Shifley and Connor were on the ice way too long. Their shift was too long. They should have gotten off earlier. They made one more push up the ice when they turned over the puck, and it was a big mistake. They should have fired it back to Pionk, hung on to possession, changed, and gotten fresh legs out there. And they went up the ice, got turned around, and then they got burned on it. So, but is that his fault? Like, is that Comrie's fault? I thought Comrie played a heck of a game.
Yeah. I that just goes to show. I think what my comment is,
Yeah,
the 3-6-1 that Comrie is not necessarily indicative of how well he's played.
I
Um,
agree.
I can also think of, 2 games or 1 game for sure where, it was tied in the third period and the Jets had a shift where things don't go according to plan, and they lose the game. But I can certainly say, that Eric Comrie is not the reason for the losses when he's playing.
I agree.
And that's interesting, right? Because I think that you're getting to a point where um you're going to have to lay off Hellebuck a little bit in the second half, especially when he's playing in the Four Nations tournament. Because one would suspect that he would be the American starter over
Yep.
Jake Ottinger. I don't think that's a question. And if he isn't, then the U.S. coaching staff needs to reevaluate their decisions, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, so I'm just like, how do you view this? Because I think it's a very precarious situation that the Jets find themselves in. They have a fairly significant lead on third place in the division, but not second, which is currently occupied by Minnesota. Dallas also has 2 games in hand, where if they win them, make a pull within 2 or 3 points of the Jets, and maybe even surpass Minnesota.
Yep.
I guess my question is, like, are we in an okay position where, yes, the ideal thing for Hellebuck is 60, 65 games, get him ready for the playoffs? Or are we in a situation where you're okay with him playing 65 to 67 games if it means the Jets give themselves first place? Because
Yep.
to me, I think first place is very, very important this year. To me, as a Jets fan, I don't want any part of Colorado, even though you might get them in the wild card. I don't want any part of Minnesota in the first round. I don't want any part of, Dallas in the first round. Would I take my chances with Colorado? Probably, just given the fact that if you can shut down the McKinnon line, you can pretty much shut them down.
So wait. So what are you suggesting? If you don't want the Jets to play Colorado, Dallas, or what was the third one?
Minnesota,
then you're suggesting they're going to go. You're saying they should be winning first place in the division and playing a wild card from the Pacific Division.
Yeah, or their own division if 5 Central teams happen to make it.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I just think bottom line, what I'm trying to say, Rick, is I feel it's in the best interest of the Winnipeg Jets to finish in first. And if that means Connor Hellebuck has to play 2 to 3 to 4 extra games to ensure that you get there, I think that's something that you need to seriously consider, especially since the Jets play very well defensively to sort of eliminate any shot volume, any high shot volume most games. Was evidenced by that 22 save shutout on Saturday. So I'm just wondering where you sit on that, because like it's okay to say, okay, you're gonna pull back on Hellebuck, but can you afford to pull back on Hellebuck with the division as close and competitive as it is?
Sorry, one more time. Can I what with Hellebuck?
Yeah, can you pull back on Hellebuck in the second half, give Comrie a few more starts, if presumably this division is going to be as tight as it is down the stretch?
Yeah, listen. I'm sure that was the same debate that the Lightning have with Vasilevsky back in the day when they were fighting for cups. Even now, that's always the challenge as a coach and as a team is you want to ride your main guy for the majority of the games because they give you the better chance. Now, Comrie's a good goalie, but I don't think anybody would think that, all things being even, that you pick Comrie over Hellebuck if they're both healthy, both rested, and they've both played the same amount of games in the season leading up to game 41, let's say, and they've each played 20 games. I think you'd still pick Hellebuck every time because of his track record and who he is. But that being said, I agree with you. Like, is the reason that the Jets have not looked sharp the last few years in the playoffs because Hellebuck is tired? I don't know. He hasn't been good. Now, is he going to tell you, yeah, I was tired and I was terrible, and that's why we lost? He's never going to say that. I mean, I don't even know if he would admit it or even realize it. But I agree with you. I think a starting goalie, in my opinion, especially with Hellebuck, and especially because the Jets are going to make the playoffs, in my opinion, he should not be playing more than 62 games. Like he should play 3 out of every 4. Comrie should get, by the end of the season should have at least 20 starts. So how many starts does Comrie have now? What's his record now?
3, 6, and 1, so 10.
Okay, 10 games, but that's not halfway. That's a little bit more than halfway, right? So
yep.
let's
face it, if they continue to do what they do, he's on pace for 20 starts.
No, he's on pace for less than 20 starts.
Well, to 18 or 7 or 18.
Because haven't the Jets played 45 games already?
Yeah, they played 40.
Yeah, I think it's 45. That was
43, 44, I think.
I was 45, but okay. But even still, okay, it's roughly
I'll
halfway.
look it up here while you're talking.
No, it's fine. But you just look at the schedule over the next. I was just actually looking at it for the rest of the month of January and into February, the first week.
It's 44, by the way.
Pardon?
44.
44. Okay, so it's 3 games more than halfway. And I guess if he plays in the next 3 games, then you're about right on pace for that. So, okay. But I'm just saying now, the thing is the Jets don't have another back-to-back. I'm just looking at the schedule here until the end of February. February 26th and 27th. They play every second night for the rest of January, and then they play February 1, 4, and 7. So they have 3-day breaks or 2-day breaks between those last 3 games. And then there's the 2-week break for the Four Nations Cup and the players break. So I'm just saying, it's not like if Hellebuyck played every game and he's playing every second night, is that going to tire him out? The Jets might argue, say, listen, we're going to ride the horse, we're going to play it, but I think it's a bad idea. I personally would be very disciplined. If you want to be selective with Comrie and play him against the teams that you believe you have on paper, the strongest chance, maybe you play him on that game against Utah. Yeah, maybe tomorrow night. When was the last time that Comrie started? Well, he just started on Friday, so that was just 1 game ago. Right. I don't know if I start him tomorrow. Maybe I start him against Seattle or against the Calgary. That's probably what I do. Every 4 games, Hellebuyck plays 3, Comrie plays. Now, Hellebuyck may play 5, and then you play Comrie once, a game in between, then play him again. I'm just saying over the course of 20 games, he should be playing 4 to 5 games out of 20. So.
Yeah, and I think that gets you right in line with the 62 ish.
Yeah, 62 and 20. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to talk about this week quickly, and Rob kind of touched on this. Jets are looking like they're going to be without Namestnikov for the foreseeable future due to an injury. Lowry elevated to the 2 center position. Lines 3 and 4 have also been altered. What do we think of this line configuration for Saturday? I think it was very interesting. I'll be honest, I was watching the game on my screen while working, just kind of checking in on it.
Yep.
And I kind of had a bit of a conniption when I saw Adam Lowry at second line center. To be honest. And then I realized it was the Namestnikov, and I remember he had gotten that shot off the foot, finished the game, and probably his presumptive injury got worse after he took off the skate. The line configurations, for those that are wondering, first line is untouched with Connor, Scheifele, Velarde. Second line is Lowry, centering Ehlers and Iafallo. Third line is Tapari, centering Niederreiter, Perfetti. Fourth line is Gustafsson, centering Barron and Toninato. The D pair is Morrissey, DeMello, Samberg, Pionk. And today at practice, they took Dylan Codwin off that third pair and put Stanley and Hainela back together, which appears to be the third D pairing for tomorrow. That being said, what do we think of this new second line with Lowry between Ehlers and Iafallo? It's interesting because the coach had said something to the effect of, I got an idea watching this game and I want to store it in the memory bank, for lack of a better term.
Mm-hmm.
It's two guys that mucked it up in the corner, for lack of a better term, opening up a lot of space for a speedster like Nick Ehlers, who used his speed in that Colorado game. Also was forced to defend, which is something that we hadn't seen from Nick Ehlers, and did a pretty good job of it. Um, so I guess my question is, like, are you okay with this? Lowry centering the second line with Iafallo, who's in for Appleton, and then sort of that configuration with Ehlers.
Yeah. Well, I was at the game on Saturday night, and
Okay.
I had no idea. Like they said they weren't sure. Even when we were heading to the game, they were saying on the radio they weren't sure if Nemestikov was going to play or not. It was sort of a, I wouldn't say game time decision, but I think what they decided to do is, because it was a game that was right after the last one, he got injured on
Yep.
Friday, Saturday night. It's not much time to turn around. Give him an extra day. I don't know, like, what you're saying. He was not at your practice today.
Yeah. So the injury happened on Friday.
Yeah.
And he did not play Saturday, has not been at practice each of the last 2 days. Granted,
Okay.
they had Sunday off, was not at practice today,
Okay.
does not appear to be an option for
Okay. So he's
tomorrow.
not. Okay. He's not. He wasn't at practice today. Okay.
No.
So that being said, went to the game and I saw, oh, what's this? And I was like, who's on the line? And then I thought, who's centering what? Because you couldn't quite figure out, because I didn't know what had happened. I didn't see, the line rushes that had happened during practice or even during the warm up. And then I said, what's this? Lowry centering Ehlers and Iafallo. And you know what? After the game, I agree with you. There were some interesting comments by Scott Arniel. He said he said, you have to make changes like this. He says, I don't like shuffling the lines too much, because they get used to playing together. They learn off of each other. He says, but sometimes you got to do it. So if that's in a situation where it's an injury, or if the team is not playing well and they get shut out in a game, like, to your point, he puts this in his memory bank, and he actually said, what I saw tonight, I really liked. And that's not
right.
for
And that was a variation of what he said.
Yeah, but he didn't just say, oh, I noticed it, or I liked some things we did. Scott Arniel doesn't say a lot like that. He tries to keep so for him to say, I really liked what I saw, and I'm putting that in my memory bank, I think, or some words to that effect, or I'm putting that away when I need to think about it later. They were talking about it after he got off the radio, and they were saying that's going to be Arniel. He's going to use it. He'll go back when guys get healthy, but maybe in the playoffs they get shut out in the game, maybe on the stretch. Maybe on the long road trips they have in March, they got a 4-gamer and then a 3-gamer. Maybe one game they don't play well. He can throw in the blender and put Lowry out there with Ehlers and Iafallo again and change it up, because he said something very interesting, and so did the guys on the radio too afterwards.
Yeah,
that you'd think Lowry can't play with a guy like Ehlers because he's not as fast as Ehlers, or he's not as creative, or blah, blah, blah. But sometimes the creative guys, all they need is a guy to just be smart with the puck. Like you say, Iafallo and Lowry in the corners, banging around, or springing the puck out and letting Ehlers go and fly and just going hard to the net when a shot comes. It's a completely different dynamic. So I thought the lines were great. I mean, the Jets didn't need a lot of scoring because they played very well defensively. And to your point, I believe that game might have been the very best game all around that the Jets played all year. They shut out Colorado in Colorado, I think.
In Winnipeg.
Was that 1-0 game?
Yeah, in Winnipeg.
That was a while back, wasn't it? No, or was it?
Yeah, it was early on in the season.
In November, the beginning of November. And that was all about Hellebuck. I think they were outshot 45-25 or something. And the Jets just hung on and hung on. It was Hellebuck. First star, earned everything. He was first star on Saturday night. But I would argue, I don't know that he was a first star. I guess you give it to a guy if he gets a shutout. He faced 22 shots. The Jets blocked like 30 shots or something. He faced 22. And I don't know if any one of those 22 shots was actually a high risk scoring opportunity.
Yeah.
So all that to say, I think the Jets, they played their defensive style amazingly well. And whether that's because of the lineup change and just the way things work. Maybe guys had to just work a little bit harder because they were with new guys. So they had to make sure that they were smart in their own end. But I really liked what I saw, and they got enough offense. Again, they didn't even get a power play, which is shocking. They didn't. I think there were some times they probably could have earned one, but they didn't get one from the refs.
Yeah.
And I just thought this, like, for having injuries, every team's got to go through it. You got to find a way to score goals in other ways. I still wish that somehow a Perfetti would get it going, because he hasn't scored in like a moon, or like since the last full moon or harvest moon came out.
Yeah.
And he had chances to score again. Playing with Niederreiter, it might be a good thing. Niederreiter set him up a few times on Saturday night. And one time he the puck got knocked away. Another time he missed. But maybe playing with some new guys, Niederreiter and Kupari, they're smart. And maybe that helps him a little bit more than playing with Ehlers and Nemestikov, who are smart, but who are smaller players. They're small, fast players. Whereas I would argue Kupari and Niederreiter, they're fast. I mean, they're quick, but they're larger guys. They're 6'2", 6'3". They're big bodies. And that might be what Perfetti needs. So I don't know. I like this Saturday night.
It's interesting too, because I looked at the way the ice time was distributed amongst the forwards on Saturday. David Gustafsson is a team low for forwards at
9 or 10 minutes.
8:48 minutes, and the high end was Mark Scheifele at 18:30 for forwards. That includes power play time. Granted, Scheifele gets a few extra shifts, right? You roll your top line coming out of immediate timeout, etc., etc. What really surprised me was Gabriel Velarde only 15:42 of ice time. But just, I guess what I'm trying to say is really come to a point where they're really rolling all four lines. Now, granted, the defense might leave some room to be desired. Logan Stanley only 12:43. The high end was Dylan Samberg at 24:47. Granted, it's only 6 defensemen versus 12 forwards, so typically your defensemen will have a higher ice total because there's more responsibility for them and fewer options. And you're on the ice basically every third shift. Granted, a couple of special teams opportunities might change that. If you take a boatload of penalties, your penalty kill defenseman will see a higher ice time. And the other thing I wanted to talk about quickly with Dylan Samberg is, yes, they had the one power play goal given up to LA or right off the end of a power play, but it just seemed like that penalty kill has also stabilized a little bit as well with Dylan Samberg back in the lineup. So it's interesting, right, how one player can have that much of a domino effect, but it's also great to see that the Jets are able to pull off or lay off some of their high-end players and put their fourth end in position to be pretty effective.
Yep, I agree.
And I think that's the mark of a really good team, right? And then all of a sudden, Rich, let's say your team doesn't have it, or you need to come back and win a game, and you want to go Scheifele, Velarde, and Connor, for 26, 27 minutes. You have the ability to do that if that's something you need to do down the line for one reason or another. I can remember days, Rick, where Little, Ladd, and Wheeler were on the ice for 26 minutes a game, and the fourth line couldn't even see more than 5 minutes. Toward the end of the season, the high-end guys were worn down, and the Jets suffered as a result. So this is a much more sustainable brand of hockey when you're distributing your minutes more evenly.
Yep, I agree. I'd like to see more. I'd even like to see the fourth line played really well. They were in fact, I don't know if you noticed on the TV, but in the game when they played, more often than not, they were in the offensive zone. and they were cycling the puck, or the puck would come out to center ice. They get it, and they just bang it right back in and chase after it. And that's what they're supposed to do. All they're supposed to do is not get scored against, put pressure on the other team, and give the other lines a rest so they can come out and score. The only line that I noticed in the game that got cycled in a few times with the Avalanche doing a lot of pressing and having shots against was, again, the Scheifele line. That line got pinched a few times. Now they end up getting matched up sometimes against the McKinnon and the Makar. So, okay, fine. But that was the line that got into trouble, if you will, for the lack of a better phrase. But Toninato, Barron, and who's the center? Sorry, David
Gustafson.
David Gustafson. Sorry, his mind or his.
It was Barron. It was Barron, Toninato, and Gustafson on the
Gustafson. When those guys were on the ice, I don't recall ever there being any trouble in their own end. Maybe there was for a little bit, like just a little bit of cycling from the outside and a whole bunch of wrist shots trying to get through. But they played well. So my point is, why not play them more? I would play them more. I would save Scheifele and Connor and Velarde for less shifts. Keep them out there. If you put them out less, then when you get a power play, you could put them out there for a minute and a half to 2 minutes for the whole time if you want, because they're so they're so good at it. I would try to load level more, and especially if you're up. Let's say like the Jets were up 2-0. I would not play Scheifele, Connor, and Velarde or Morrissey and DeMello the last 5 minutes of the game if they're up by a couple of goals. Give them a rest. Let them have a break. There's going to be games where you're going to have to ride them like mules when it goes into overtime and it's a grinder. And then you're going to and then you may be down a goal or you're tied and then you're going into overtime. So, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's really interesting that way. And I think you can really be selective too, based on who your matchup is. If you feel like you need to run your first line a little bit more, go ahead. If the game dictates that your third and fourth lines are playing really well, you can run them a little bit more, right? There's none of this. Nobody needs to be on the ice for 28 minutes just because anymore. And
exactly.
And that's going to benefit. That's going to benefit the Jets in the long term, for sure. Let's quickly talk about the rest of the National Hockey League. With the one thing that jumps out at me quickly, and we're going to look at the Eastern Conference as a whole, because we only have about 20 minutes or so left before I ask you what the Jets are going to do this week and that usual spiel on the way out. I think we're seeing a prime example just how difficult it is going to be to make up ground in a conference, in a division, the way it is. I'm just looking right now. The bottom of the East is Buffalo, 43 games played, 37 points. The playoff line is is 43 games and 46 points. Between 47 points and 42 points, or even 41 points. That is basically everybody excluding Buffalo is within 6 points. And really out west, there's really only 3 teams that have been eliminated, maybe stretching 4, if you want to put the Kraken on this list. But, you can eliminate Chicago, you can eliminate San Jose. I think you can pretty much eliminate Nashville. Teetering on the edge, having played 44 games, is the Seattle Kraken, who did not look good yesterday in their game against Detroit. But all that being said, we're in the middle of January for all intents and purposes, and 28 of the 32 teams have a shot at making the playoffs, in my mind. What do you make of how close everything is?
Well, I just think it's a part of the parity. I just think, and actually, what's really exciting about that too is like you say, all that parity, and especially with the Canadian teams. All 7 Canadian teams are either in a playoff spot,
or have a chance. Granted, I think a lot of work has to be done for for Calgary and both Calgary and Vancouver to make the playoffs. I think they have to unseat one of they have to unseat one of the Central teams. That's just me.
Yeah.
I don't
And
know
then
if that's
Ottawa, right? And then Ottawa's not in a playoff position, but they're in a really hard division too.
yeah, they have to unseat somebody, probably a Tampa Bay, or a Boston, to get in.
Yeah.
I think it's realistic that Boston is sort of on the outside. You could make an argument for Montreal and for Ottawa to get in, but realistically, Rich, I think one of those two teams makes it. I think both teams really, really hard pressed to make it, but I would expect one of Ottawa and one of Montreal to be at least competitive into game number 78, 79. Uh, the way things are going, and it just give credence to, if you can get a really good start, how that's going to help you. Um, just how difficult even going 500 is, to get anywhere in the playoffs. And I would argue, for the most part, even at 500, I think you're losing ground, when your
Yeah.
conference is that tight. 6-4, 5-4-1, you're hard pressed. I think that's sort of the new 500, and then you need to start more 6-4-1, 7-3s, 8-2s, 8-1-1 consistently.
Yeah.
And I think, to be honest, too, I wonder if the standings are a bit of a mirage, too, just because of the uh, the 2 and the 1, where you get the loser point if you go to overtime. Um, it's still a loss, but you get a point. So I wonder if eventually we look at a scenario where it's 3 for a regulation win, 2 for an overtime win, 1 for an overtime loss, and I think that's sort of really your barometer of how good you are. Um, Granted, if you lose 12 or 13 games in overtime, um, typically that's 12 or 13 points you didn't have before. It really it clouds your record, so to say. Um, like for contest, and just to sort of back up my point here, the Eastern playoff line right now is Columbus. Okay, there are 3 games over 500, but really they're not, because their record right now sitting in that playoff spot is 20, 17, and 6, whereas Ottawa's just on the outside looking in. It's 20, 18, and 3. There's 2 teams behind them that are
Yeah.
20, 18, and 4. So, yes, it shows you 2 games above 500, but you have loser points, which really makes it look like you're 2 games under 500 or at 500. So what I'm trying to say is, I'm not trying to dispute that there's not a race going on. The 1 point in overtime or loss in a shootout is certainly keeping a lot more teams in it, which is why I think the NHL is reluctant to move to a 3-2-1 sort of system. Because Gary
Yeah.
could say, in game 79, 14 of our 16 teams in a given conference are within the playoffs. But quite honestly, it just fuels the ambition for an expanded playoff. But I don't know if I have the appetite for. The commissioner certainly doesn't. But you could make the argument,
Yeah.
expanded playoff would have a benefit. But I just find it so interesting, right? Because even with a game within the game, and I know I'm ranting here pretty good. Um, the games within the games are close. It's 3-2 with an empty netter, 2-1 with an empty most nights. The days of 6-goal blowouts and even 5-1 with no empty netters, or 5-0 leads at one point, they're very few and far between. A lot of them are in the 4-3, 5-3, that sort of area. And the teams play each other 4 times in a season, typically 2-1-1, 2-2. is a pretty typical season series.
Yeah.
And it just muddles the picture, is what I'm trying to say. So it's very interesting, right? In NHL, we love races. Oh, such and such a team is in it through 80 games. Well, and then you wonder, right, who benefits? It's typically the team that had the underlying pretty good 5-on-5 numbers. Um, but typically it's so in the playoffs because the overtime is no longer 3-on-3, right? Whereas if you've been to overtime 14 times, won eight games, let's say, well, how does that translate when your overtime goes to 5-on-5 instead of 3-on-3 if you have high end skill guys? So, well, which is why I wasn't necessarily bent out of shape about that LA game as much as some others were, for whatever reason. Um, 5-on-5, the Jets play a very sustainable brand of hockey, which I think it didn't bode well in the playoffs. Their question will always be the size. I know I kind of bit off a lot more than I can chew and went in 15,000 different directions, but that's kind of my fault when I'm looking at the standings.
Yep.
Any objections, comments?
No, no. I agree with you. It's just really hard. It's really hard for a team to make a move now, right? You're halfway through the season. It's like the Jets could play 500 hockey, and I think they'll still have. No, I don't think they will play 500. But if they went 5-5 or 5-4-1 for the next 10 games, and then the next 10 games, like, I don't know that they'd fall out of a playoff spot because somebody's gonna. Anybody that goes, like you say, 7-3 versus the Jets going 5-5 over 10 games, that's only gaining 4 points on the Jets.
Right.
And the Jets are at least 3 or 4 points ahead of Colorado for sure. I think they're a little bit more on the Dallas. So I'm just saying, like, it's just hard to make up ground now. You've got to, like, you literally have to win 10 in a row, and somebody goes and hope that everybody else in your division goes 5-5 so that you can make up 10 points. But who goes 10-0, and how often does every other team in your division go 5-5 when you go 10-0? Like, when was I'd like to know the last time that happened. Probably somebody who runs stats could look at that. I bet you it happens once every 10 years or something. So
Right,
saying,
and even the Jets 14-1 to start the season, like that pretty much got them into the playoffs. Granted,
yeah,
they've been a few games above 500 since then, but the Jets have been pretty much a playoff team at the 15-game mark, unless they go 1-13-1, which isn't going to happen, I don't think. But
yeah,
it just goes to show how important, a strong start is.
yeah,
And that's where the Jets, and you and I have had this discussion before, the Jets had so much chemistry and camaraderie that they had an advantage over, say, a team like Nashville, who was still looking for who to play with who, which defenseman plays with who, and, a very, very slow start for Nashville. And while they're in the basement and pretty much one of the teams that I've declared out of the playoffs, because from what I've seen, they're not in a position to go 14-1-1. If past performance is an indicator of future results, which really it isn't in most cases.
yeah.
So it's just very interesting as well.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to touch on quickly, and I know I'm not sure if you have a topic or two that you want to touch on. I'm beginning to worry myself a little bit with the Seattle Kraken now. I don't lay awake at night and worry about it like it's my problem. But this is a team that is 2 years removed from upsetting the Colorado Avalanche in the playoffs. We're right in there from game 80 to game 81 last year before they were eliminated. To me, this is a huge step back. For a team that's now lost, I think it was 7 out of 10 and 9 out of 13. Yeah, they had a big win in Buffalo on Saturday, but didn't look good. I think I texted you yesterday. 4 goals in the first 10 minutes against Detroit. Has now won 7 in a row under Todd McCullough after dropping the opening game. Like, to me, I just don't know where the Kraken go from here. For a team that was said to be rebuilding, I think the rebuild is still pending, shall we say. And it just makes what the Golden Knights did all the more impressive.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree with you. Seattle was really, like, folks really thought they were going to be something because they had some big off-season signings with Montador, right? I believe.
Yep.
And there's one I can't remember the forward on the top, but I mean, Montador has played well, but it's, you know what? Sometimes, and you know what? It just goes to show you, and this maybe leads us into another discussion point, which is the result of this, is that maybe going out and signing big name free agents in the offseason to big UFA contracts for 5, 6, 7 years at 7, 8 million a year for these big long terms, and fighting other teams and competing to get these guys and bring them in like Nashville and Seattle did. It doesn't always work out. It just doesn't. And
it's a cautionary tale, but you can't.
It's a cautionary tale. Very good word. Very good phrase. It's a cautionary tale. And let me just finish my point, is that it leads you to think, because I get frustrated, probably like you do and other Jets fans do. Oh, why don't the Jets and the Chevy, why don't they go out and make a play for Montador? Why don't they go out and make, sign Montador for 5 years for $8 million a year? Well, they did that with Wheeler to keep him. And I think they got burned on that, because the last 2 years they had to buy him out for 1 year, and the second last year he wasn't very good, was playing third and fourth line, was injured. He shouldn't have even been on the first line, and was not even earning anywhere close to $8 million or whatever the value of that contract was. So all that to say, maybe there's something to the game of, you draft and develop, you sign the guys you want to keep, the guys you don't, you either trade them at the trade deadline, or you let them go into free agency like they did with Brendan Dillon. Thanks for coming out. You had a huge push last year. You wanted to keep him. You thought you had a chance for the cup, so you keep him, as opposed to acquiring a defenseman. You hang on to the guy you have, and then if you lose him, you lose him in free agency. But I think there's something to that. And these huge spends and these big plays like Nashville and Seattle have done, they haven't panned out. Look at the teams right now who are doing well. It's Colorado, Winnipeg, nobody with any big splashes.
Vegas.
Yeah, Vegas, no big splashes really. They lost Marcia Show, so they signed, what's his name, last year from San Jose. They're
Aiden Hill.
No, like the sniper, the guy that came over in a trade at the
Hurdle.
Hurdle, right?
Thomas
so
Hurdle.
They replaced Marcia Show with Hurdle. Whatever. But I'm just saying, look at a lot of these teams. It's the same. It's, they go out, they draft, develop, even the teams in the huge markets, and making a play for a whole bunch of UFAs. You spend a whole bunch of money, you get your fans excited, you sell a whole bunch of season seats maybe, but it doesn't always translate into success on the ice. And then the problem is, if you don't have success, now what do you do? Because you got all those albatross contracts hung around your neck, and nobody's going to be there to throw you a lifeline and be willing to trade for a guy that's signed to 6 years for $8 million a year when he's scoring 15 to 20 points a season. It's going to be hard to get somebody to do it unless you throw in a first round draft choice with it, right? So
it's a very expensive way to do business both ways.
Or it can be, yeah.
But I think that's why, right? That's to say you can never quite build your team through free agency. And listen, I think that's true in all sports. I've long been a believer that free agency is the way to supplement your team, but not a way to build your team. And to be honest, I think if you're in Nashville, you go after Stamkos, you go after Shea, you go after Marchessault. Those are the types of players that you go after when you have, you're 1 or 2 pieces away. I think if we're realistic, Nashville wasn't 1 or 2 pieces away from being good. And I'm curious how they approach this offseason, and maybe they come back next year and be what we expected them to be this year. But
Yeah.
to me, they just struggle to score goals. That's something unimaginable. If you would have told me that Nashville, given all this star power, would have that much trouble scoring goals, I wouldn't have believed you. Um, but I think it's just a cautionary tale that you cannot build a team through free agency as much as you want to try.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree. I mean, I can't say any more than yes. I agree.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
maybe in
So
hindsight now, even though you and I and all of Jets Nation gets all excited in the offseason when the Jets don't make a play for a big free agent, other than at the at the trade deadline, they've done that the last few years. Um, Maybe in hindsight, the Jets know exactly what they're doing.
yeah, it's interesting. Um, for sure. And you know what? Let's be honest. Kevin Cheveldayoff is not one to break the bank for big free agents. I think the biggest check he spent on free agency to this day remains to be Matthew Perreault. That ended up working out pretty well.
Yeah,
But the Jets have never been big money spenders in free agency.
exactly. They'll
And
sign guys here and there, right? Like they did with a Nemestikov or re-signing Niederreiter 3 years, 3.5 or 4 million, whatever. Those are really good plays for second and third line players. But you're right; they're just never in the game or in the market for the superstars, right? Like I don't think they would even consider trying to go after Steve Stamkos or Jonathan Marchessault, right? So,
yeah, it's very interesting that way. Anyway, we are almost out of time.
yep,
The Jets this week they play Vancouver,
yep.
Seattle, Calgary. We're back next Monday prior to their game in Utah. I'm really excited about this next road trip, Rick. It's Utah next Monday, Seattle next Wednesday.
Yep.
So another chance at avenging the New Year's Eve loss in Denver. But first, the last three games of the homestand, I'm going to say it here right now, Rick, the Jets go 2-0-1 this week and put an exclamation mark on a really good homestand.
Oh, 2-0-1 Vancouver, Seattle, Calgary.
Correct.
Okay. Well, 2-0-1. Boy, you're okay. You didn't do your 1-1-1, which is normally
Nope.
your play. Right
No.
down the middle, eh? Small, medium, large. Boom, boom, boom. I'm gonna go out on the limb. We'll see what anybody else thinks. I think now, because they've had some rest, they've gone a few days in between now between Colorado and Vancouver and had a stretch between Nashville and LA as well of a couple of days. I think they're very well rested. They looked really sharp on Saturday. I think Vancouver, even though Vancouver is a hard play, they played well against the Leafs on Saturday night, played very well. I like the Jets going 3-0, Vancouver, Seattle, and Calgary at home.
The only thing is, Vancouver showed me a little bit of something when nobody expected anything out of them in Toronto on Saturday. That's the only cautionary tale I have with that team.
Yeah,
We ran out of time, but I wanted to talk about the Leafs. To me, they seem to cannot get out of their own way. They had
yeah,
Vancouver fly in the day of the game, and you lay that dud.
yeah,
You couldn't hold a lead against Carolina.
yeah.
You lost that game. Sorry, but I'm asking a lot of questions about Toronto, which we can talk about next time.
That's all right.
I want to see how the Leafs do this week as
I
well.
know.
'Cause they're one of those hot and cold, right? They don't want a 5-1-1 run, and then it's a 0-2-1 run where
I
it's like
know.
they don't even look like the same team.
They
Um,
don't. That's the thing. Their inconsistency, like against Vancouver, they just looked like they weren't interested. Their power play was just awful. Like
yeah.
now you could give lots of credit to Vancouver for playing well defensively and making it hard.
But
But
where
I
did that
agree
come
with
from Vancouver? Because their previous 5 games, they looked like a team that didn't even resemble a team that was near first place in the Pacific last year. So it's
I know.
interesting.
I know, but I agree with you. That has been the Leafs' whole season. Is 3 weeks ago they were ready to throw them out. They're all bums, and then the last 2 or 3 weeks they were so great. They were moving up in the standings. They
They're
were
going to run away with the Atlantic, and they're going to run
an
away with the first
overdrive.
round.
Brian Hayes was going on and on. Oh, they're a threat. They're going to win the division. They're a threat to win the conference. Is this the year? And blah 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 blah. And they're going on and on. And now the last 2 or 3 games, like you say, they go like from like this to like this, and it's not like they lose Marner, Matthews, Nylander, and the Tavares from the lineup. It's the same guys, and they go like that from up and down, up and down. Like that's why you give some credit to the Jets. They'll lose games here and there. They lost to LA, but they were in that game. They played LA well. LA, they don't throw a lot at you. You got to earn for every inch of ice, especially in front of the net. They don't let you skate a lot through the neutral zone and ramp it up. You got to grind it out with them. And they played that game. Now they lost. They got a point going to overtime, but they looked okay. They didn't look like the Leafs that are just up and down like in an elevator. The Jets have looked pretty consistent all year. So, yeah.
Listen, Rich, I still think that division goes to Florida, Sunrise, Florida, but the Florida Panthers don't look like the same team right now.
Okay.
But that's okay. They can sleepwalk through 82 games without the Colorado Avalanche, without the Vegas Golden Knights about, sleepwalking through 80 games and turning it on when it counts.
Right.
As well. Anyway, that's a great show. Thank you, Rich, for giving me that extra half an hour. Thanks everybody for watching. Thank you for the engagement. Great to see. We're back next Monday night in advance of the Jets game at Utah, in advance of the college football national final as well, to talk maybe a little bit about that team, but also the week that is for the Jets as they finally go back on the road, come home for a couple more after those two games. But 1 week at a time. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to talk to you for the last hour. Hope you enjoyed it as well. And thank you very much for watching. For Red Petty, I'm Michael Justin. Have a great night, and we will chat again next week. Good night from Winnipeg.